Blackmagic has been slowly working through my wishlist from my ATEM Mini video back in August 2020. I made that video before the ATEM Mini Extreme launched, and I wrote out a whole list of things that I wanted them to add to the next version of the ATEM Mini. Out of that list, we got more inputs, a headphone jack, another HDMI output, a second USB port, more upstream and downstream keyers, and even macro buttons. But there is one feature from my wishlist that they haven't built yet until now. Like, it'd be super cool if the streaming bridge were actually built into the ATEM and just showed up as another video source. Then you could link multiple ATEMs together across the internet for some pretty cool workflows. They did it. They built the streaming bridge into the latest ATEM Television Studio HD8. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. I've been using ATEM switchers for almost 10 years now. My first ATEM was the ATEM Television Studio, the little tiny 6-channel one that didn't even support 1080p. I upgraded to the ATEM TV Studio HD, and I used that one for years, mostly for filming conferences and events. For my home studio, I got the ATEM Mini as soon as it was announced, and I got the ATEM Mini Extreme the next year. And now I'm mainly using the ATEM Constellation 4ME in this studio. So let's talk about what Blackmagic just announced, the new ATEM Television Studio HD8. There are two versions of the new Television Studio HD8, which are nearly identical but have a couple of key differences. Let's start with what they both have in common. This is an 8-input switcher, and all the inputs are SDI. There are two aux outputs, which you can use for things like sending a video to a projector or a confidence monitor. And there is also a dedicated multi-view output, as well as a dedicated program output. The SDI inputs also have a corresponding SDI output, which will feed the program video back to your camera operators so they can see what's on air. There are two USB ports which work the same way as the ATEM Mini Extreme. Either or both can be used as a webcam or to record to an external USB drive. As far as audio, there are two XLR inputs, stereo RCA inputs, analog quarter-inch outputs, and a talkback port for a headset. There is also MADI audio in and out, which is super cool to see on this model since the Constellation line doesn't even get MADI until you go all the way up to the 4ME. MADI is multi-channel digital audio over a single coax cable. It lets you break out audio from all of the sources in the ATEM into a dedicated audio mixer. And you can also bring audio back from a mixer into the ATEM as well. I've been really enjoying using the MADI audio in the 4ME with my X32 rack mixer for a while now. And lastly, I want to mention that there is also a 4-port Ethernet switch inside, which is just pretty neat. It just keeps things a little bit tidier on your desk, so you don't have to worry about having a separate network switch to connect this to the rest of the gear on your desk. So those are the similarities between both of the models. But the ISO model adds two more huge features. Of course, there is the ISO recording. This records all 8 inputs as well as the program output into separate files on the drive. This is really useful for multicam shows, since you can fix mistakes later by going back to the original files. Or you can just record all 8 at the same time and do all of your cutting in between angles in post. I actually record a lot of my videos this way, where I just hit record and I don't do any live switching. And then in the editor, I'll choose which angles to use when later. But the other huge feature that the ISO model adds is the ability to bring in remote video feeds. Each of the 8 inputs can be switched from SDI to a remote camera. You still have only 8 video sources at a time, but you can change the inputs into being essentially a built-in streaming bridge. So you can stream video over the internet directly into the ATEM without needing extra hardware. In the announcement, Grant specifically talked about streaming video from the new Blackmagic Studio cameras, as well as from a web presenter or an ATEM Mini. It is very cool to see this feature in the new ATEM. I think it opens up a ton of possibilities. One of the other really cool things they did was to build in a cloud pod that uses the built-in SSD for storage. The Cloud Pod is a new device they launched last year at NAB, where you can connect a USB drive and use it as network storage, but it also syncs to Dropbox and Google Drive. I've actually been using this to sync projects to my Google account, so I can drop files into it over my local network and then share a folder from Google Drive a few minutes later once the files have uploaded. And the new TV Studio HD8 has this feature built in. So that means you can do a recording, even an ISO recording, directly onto the 2TB built-in drive, and as soon as you're done, you can share the files on Google. This is gonna make remote collaboration with studios really, really slick. So who do I think this is for? This really is a television studio in a box. I think this is a great kit for smaller studios that want to have a very powerful setup that is also flexible for the future. You can do a lot with everything built into this device, and there's plenty of ways you can expand this going forward. Now it does have only 8 inputs, so that might not be enough for larger studios, but 8 inputs is enough for a multi-camera set for like a podcast, as well as adding slides from a computer and even key fill graphics on top. The built-in cloud pod means you can hit record at the studio, and within minutes of the end of your production, your remote editor can start working on that project. Now, I do want to talk about some of the things that I actually think they didn't get right with the new ATEM HD8. I would have liked to see at least 1, maybe even 2 of the inputs be HDMI. Even though I prefer SDI for most things, there's always going to be that one HDMI source you want to connect, like a computer for graphics or an iPad for video playback. It is really too bad that there isn't at least one HDMI input, because now you're going to need to connect and power a separate HDMI to SDI converter. It also would have been nice to have some video playback features. They built in so many different devices into this. It's a shame they didn't also add basically a hyperdeck inside for playing back longer videos. They added a 2TB internal SSD for recordings, so it seems like they could have also added a hyperdeck inside to be able to play back those recordings as well. Now, they do have the feature in the media pool where you can load in short clips, but that is really just for short stingers. And while the built-in streaming bridge is very cool, I am also a little bit disappointed that they aren't making any moves to SRT. And they're still relying just on the RTMP protocol. I use the web presenter for my live streams in this studio, and it works great for me because I have a solid internet connection. But the web presenter definitely doesn't do well on a slower or especially unstable network. It falls apart pretty quickly. SRT would have been a lot more reliable than RTMP. So I'm just gonna have to keep holding out hope for SRT support in a future firmware update. And lastly, I would really like to see a 16 or 20 input version of this same device for larger studios. 8 inputs does go pretty far, but once you start using inputs for graphics, like using web graphics from OBS through an Ultra Studio device, which takes 2 of the SDI ports, that leaves only 6 inputs left for your cameras. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see a larger version of this launching at NAB or later this year. I definitely think there's room for a larger version of this for studios that don't want to start putting together a solution from all the different bits and pieces that you would need to do otherwise. All right, that's it. These are my initial thoughts on the new ATEM Television Studio HD8. Will I be buying one? Probably not. I just bought the 40 input ATEM 4ME Constellation, and it has been a fantastic addition to my studio. I will link to a video down below where I actually talk more about the gear I'm using in my studio right now. I do think there is clearly a market for the new ATEM Television Studio HD8, but I'm very happy with what I have in this studio for these kinds of productions that I'm doing. So let me know down in the comments if you are planning on getting one of these and what you're gonna use it for. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.